My husband tried to give our baby to his sister because he said I was an unfit mother. I gave him two options. Sometimes in life, you hit a point where you realize everything you thought was true, everything you believed about your own family, was just a fragile lie waiting to shatter. And when it does, it shatters hard. What would you do if the one person who should have been your rock turned out to be the hand that almost helped steal your baby? Nate and I had been through hell trying to have a baby. 3 years of heartbreak, 2 devastating miscarriages, endless fertility treatments, and then, finally, our beautiful daughter, Lily, arrived at 38 weeks, healthy and perfect. Those first few days home were everything I'd ever dreamed of. Nate was right there with me, waking up for the 3 a.m. feeds, whispering stories to Lily about how desperately we'd wanted her. Our home felt full of love, a bubble of pure joy. His family threw us a huge welcome home party, and everyone was thrilled, especially his sister, Rachel. She'd been trying for kids even longer than us, with no luck. She held Lily for hours that day, wouldn't even put her down when she cried. I remember thinking, how sweet. She's going to be such a loving aunt. Oh, how wrong I was. Then Rachel started showing up every single day. At first, it was genuinely helpful. She'd bring food, help with laundry. But after about 2 weeks, things got weird. Really weird. I'd wake up to find her in the nursery at 6 a.m., just staring at Lily in her crib, saying she wanted to let me sleep. She started calling Lily my baby instead of my niece. When I gently corrected her, she'd just laugh it off, blaming my hormones. One morning, I walked into the nursery and found she'd completely rearranged everything because the layout was wrong for proper development. Nate, bless his oblivious heart, just said she was excited and trying to help. The alarm bells in my head were practically screaming. Then she started showing up specifically during Lily's feeding times. She'd sit right next to me, watching, claiming she was learning for when she had her own baby. Then she bought formula. She kept insisting I switch, telling me breastfeeding was making me too tired to be a good mom. My blood ran cold. When I flat out refused, she went straight to Nate, telling him I was stubborn and putting my pride over Lily's needs. And the worst part, Nate actually asked me to consider it. The breaking point felt like a physical blow. I came home from a pediatrician appointment to find Rachel and Nate in the living room, papers spread everywhere. She'd printed out articles about postpartum depression, and they were making a list of my symptoms I absolutely did not have. She was saying I seemed overwhelmed and needed more help than I was admitting. And Nate? Nate was nodding along like an idiot. My own husband. That night, Nate sat me down. Rachel offered to take Lily for a few weeks, he said, to give you a break. Not babysit. Take her to her house an hour away. He said it would be good for me to rest and recover properly. I just stared at him. Had he lost his mind? I asked if he seriously expected me to hand over our 3-week-old baby. He accused me of proving Rachel's point by getting defensive. That's when I told him in no uncertain terms that if he ever suggested giving away our baby again, he'd be talking to divorce lawyers. He slept on the couch that night. The next day, Rachel called, crying. I just wanted to help, she wailed. You're keeping me from my niece. She said family helps each other, and I was being selfish. Then she said something that made my blood absolutely freeze. Something I'll never forget. Maybe I'd be a better mother to Lily, since I actually appreciate the gift of a child. I hung up on her, my hand shaking so violently I almost dropped the phone. That weekend, Nate's mom called. Then his dad. Then his other sister. Rachel had told his entire family that I was an unfit mother, struggling, refusing help, and they were all concerned about Lily. They wanted to check in. Then the real gut punch came. A week later, at the grocery store, one of Rachel's friends congratulated me for being such a selfless sister-in-law, for letting Rachel adopt a baby soon. That's when it clicked. This was never about helping me. This was about Rachel wanting my baby and systematically trying to manipulate everyone into making it happen. My stomach twisted. I knew I had to fight back, but how? I started recording everything. Not to post online, just for proof. Every visit, every conversation, every text message. And then I remembered the baby monitor app on my phone. It recorded sound and video. I scrolled back through the footage, and there it was. Rachel, talking about how Lily would be better off with a mother who deserved her. And then Nate, my Nate, agreeing that I seemed too attached to the baby. The betrayal was a physical ache in my chest. I decided to set a trap. I invited Rachel over for coffee, saying I wanted to apologize and clear the air. She showed up with a social worker friend she convinced to do a wellness check based on utter lies about her house being unsafe. The friend took one look at our spotless nursery, our fully stocked kitchen, and our happy, well-cared-for baby, and told Rachel she needed to stop wasting people's time. I acted confused, innocently asking what Rachel had told her. The social worker explained Rachel's claims of neglect and filth. That's when I started crying, real tears of rage and hurt, and showed her all the texts where Rachel explicitly said she wanted to take Lily. The social worker turned to Rachel and, in a firm voice, told her she needed professional help, then walked out. Rachel tried to stammer out an explanation, but I just pointed to the door and told her to get out. When Nate came home, he found me standing in the doorway, my phone clutched in my hand, all those recordings ready to play. He was sitting on the couch, eyes red, like he'd been crying, but I felt nothing for his tears anymore. I walked right up to him, my voice steady despite my shaking hands. "You have exactly 2 choices, Nate," I told him, "and you need to pick one right now." He could pack his bags and leave, or he could sit there and listen while I explained every single way he had betrayed me and our daughter. He opened his mouth to argue, but I just held up a finger. "Choose." He sank back into the couch, his face pale. He said he'd listen, but I could see it in his eyes, that familiar look when he was about to make excuses. I pulled out my phone, opened the baby monitor app, and turned up the volume. I played Rachel's voice. Lily would be better off with someone who really understood what a gift she was. And then Nate's voice. "You know, she does seem too attached." I watched his face crumble. He tried to interrupt, reaching for my phone, but I pulled it back. "You are going to sit there and listen to every single second of what you said about me." I played the recording where Rachel said I was too tired to be a good mom, and Nate agreed. Then the one where they talked about me being defensive, proving I wasn't thinking clearly. Then the one where Rachel mentioned postpartum psychosis, and Nate, instead of shutting her down, just asked what the symptoms were. I played recording after recording, watching him get smaller and smaller on that couch, his hands gripping his knees, shaking his head. I didn't stop until every single damning word had been heard. When the last recording finished, the silence was deafening. Nate put his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking with sobs. He stammered that he never meant it that way, that Rachel was just worried, and he thought maybe she had some good points. Something cold settled in my chest. I asked him straight out, "Did you actually believe I was an unfit mother, or were you just too weak to stand up to your sister?" He looked up, tears streaming, swearing he never thought I was unfit. But Rachel kept saying things, kept pointing out how tired I looked, how I snapped at her sometimes. He thought giving me a break would help. "That's not how being a parent works, Nate," I said, my voice tight with rage. "You don't just hand your 3-week-old baby to someone else for weeks because you're tired. Every new mom is tired. Asking to take our daughter away wasn't help. It was an attempt to replace me." He started to say something, but I cut him off. "I'm done listening to excuses. Here are your actual 2 choices now. You can go to therapy with me, real therapy with someone who specializes in family issues, and you cut off all contact with Rachel until she gets professional help herself. Or I call a divorce lawyer tomorrow and file for sole custody of Lily." The words hit him like a physical blow. "You can't be serious," he choked out. "You're upset. You're not thinking clearly." I laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. I'm completely serious. You have until morning to decide. Because Lily and I are packing our bags right now, and we're going to my mom's house tonight. You're not coming with us. You can sit in this house alone and think about what you've done, about how you chose your sister over your wife and daughter. He stood up, looking like he might try to stop me, but I walked past him, heading straight for the nursery. My hands were shaking as I pulled out the diaper bag, grabbing everything Lily would need. Diapers, wipes, bottles, formula, even though I was still nursing, extra clothes. Nate stood in the doorway, silent. I went to our bedroom, threw clothes into an overnight bag, not even caring what I grabbed. Then I picked up Lily from her bassinet. She made a tiny sound in her sleep, but didn't wake. Holding her close, my heart pounded. I was doing this. I was actually leaving. The thought made me feel scared and strong all at once. I carried Lily out to the living room where Nate was back on the couch, staring into space. I meant every word, I told him. You have until tomorrow morning to decide if you want to be part of this family. Then, standing right in front of him, I called Natalia. She answered on the second ring, music in the background. I need you to come get me and Lily right now, I said, trying to keep my voice even. She didn't ask questions, just said she'd be there in less than an hour. I hung up and sat in an armchair, as far from Nate as I could get, holding Lily and waiting. He tried to talk to me twice, but I just stared at the wall, unwilling to respond. When I heard Natalia's car, I grabbed the bags. She took one look at my face, then at Nate, slumped on the couch, and just grabbed the bags without a word. She hugged me tight in the doorway, careful not to squish Lily. You're doing the right thing, she whispered. What Rachel and Nate did was completely wrong. Protect your baby. We loaded everything into her car. I didn't look back as we drove away. At my mom's house, Natalia helped me get everything inside. Once Lily was settled, I finally let myself fall apart. My mom took Lily, holding her gently while I sat on the guest bed and cried harder than I had since those miscarriages. All the fear, the anger, the hurt I'd been holding in for weeks poured out. My mom sat next to me, her arm around my shoulders. When I could finally speak, I told her everything. About Rachel, about Nate, about the recordings, the social worker, the chilling words. Maybe I'd be a better mother. My mom's face grew harder with every word. She admitted she'd seen something weird. About Rachel at the welcome home party. That intense stare. How she wouldn't put Lily down. She'd almost said something, but didn't want to cause trouble. That night, Nate's calls kept lighting up my phone. 6 times, and 6 times I let them go to voicemail. My mom came in around 11. Let him sit with what he's done, she said. He needs to feel the real weight of potentially losing his family. Sometimes people don't understand how badly they've messed up until they face actual consequences. I asked if I was doing the right thing. Absolutely, she said. Protecting Lily is the only thing that matters now. I fell asleep with my hand on Lily's bassinet, feeling safer than I had in weeks, even though everything felt like it was falling apart. The next morning, I woke to a pounding on my mom's front door. It was barely 7 a.m. The pounding got louder, then Rachel's voice, high and frantic, screaming that I was keeping her from her niece. My mom appeared in the doorway, already on the phone. Stay inside with Lily and keep recording, she told me. I opened my phone's voice recorder as Rachel screamed. You have no right to take Lily away. I love her more than anything. You're cruel and selfish. My mom's voice cut through, clear and firm. Leave or I'm calling the police. Rachel just screamed louder. I want to see my baby. The police arrived within 10 minutes. Rachel was still yelling when he pulled up, her voice breaking with those awful sobs that might have fooled me if I hadn't known her game. My mom opened the door, and Rachel tried to push past, but the officer stepped in, holding up his hand. He asked Rachel to step back and explain. She started crying harder, claiming I'd stolen her niece, that she just wanted to make sure the baby was okay. He looked at her. Is Lily your child? Rachel hesitated. No, but I love her like a daughter. Do you have any legal custody or guardianship rights? No, she said defensively. The officer turned to my mom. Has she been invited to the property? Absolutely not, my mom said. She's trespassing and harassing us. Rachel started talking faster, saying my mom didn't understand, that I was struggling and refusing help. The officer asked how Rachel knew where we were staying. Rachel went quiet. My mom showed him the recording of Rachel screaming through the door. His expression hardened. He told Rachel she needed to leave immediately, or he'd arrest her for trespassing and harassment. Rachel's face crumpled, begging, "Just 1 minute, just to know she's safe." The officer was firm. "Not happening. Leave now or spend the day in jail." Rachel stared at the house, then at the officer, then finally got in her car. She sat there for a minute, just staring before driving away. The officer came inside, asking if we wanted to press charges. My mom looked at me, and I shook my head. Not because I didn't want to, but because I was just so tired. He understood, but strongly suggested we document everything and consider a restraining order. He took down Rachel's previous behavior, the social worker incident. I showed him my recordings. His jaw tightened. "What she's doing is harassment and stalking," he said. "This evidence will be valuable." He gave me his badge number. "Call me directly if she shows up again." After he left, my mom locked the door. Lily started crying from the guest room. I went to get her, holding her close. My mom made coffee. We sat at the kitchen table, not talking much, just existing. Around noon, a car pulled into the driveway. My stomach dropped. It was Nate. He looked terrible, eyes red, hair a mess. My mom let him in, her face cold. He stood in the entryway, looking at me holding Lily. "I chose us," he said, his voice hoarse. "I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. I'll cut off Rachel, go to therapy, anything." The words sounded good, but I'd heard good words before. "Words are easy, Nate. I need action." He nodded, as if he expected that. "You need to call your parents right now," I told him, with me listening, and tell them the truth about what Rachel did and what you allowed to happen. He pulled out his phone, his hand shaking, and dialed. His dad, Hugo, answered. Nate put it on speaker. He started explaining what had happened that morning. Rachel screaming at my mom's door. Hugo interrupted. "Rachel's just going through a hard time with her infertility. We need to be more understanding." Nate tried to keep talking, but his dad talked over him. "Rachel is family. You can't just cut her off." Nate's voice got louder. "Rachel tried to take Lily. She manipulated everyone into thinking my wife was unfit." Hugo said that was a strong word, and maybe Rachel was just trying to help in her own way. My hands started shaking again. Nate said there was more, about Rachel bringing a social worker to our house based on lies. His mom, Elodie, got on the phone, her voice already tearful. "This is tearing the family apart. Can't we all just sit down and work it out?" I took the phone from Nate. My voice, to my surprise, was steadier than I felt. "I understand infertility pain better than anyone after my 2 miscarriages, but that doesn't give Rachel the right to try and take my baby." Elodie made a choked sound. I kept talking, explaining about the recordings, Rachel saying she'd be a better mother, Nate agreeing I seemed too attached to my own daughter. Hugo started saying I was taking things out of context, but I talked over him. I told them about the social worker, Rachel lying about neglect. My voice was shaking now, but I kept going. "I have recordings of everything. If you don't believe me, I'll play them." Elodie started crying harder. "This is all wrong. Families should support each other. Rachel tore this family apart," I told her when she decided she deserved my baby more than I did. "I'm done being understanding while everyone enables her behavior. I've spent weeks being told I'm overreacting, too sensitive, putting my pride over Lily's needs. But I am Lily's mother, and protecting her is my job." Hugo told me I was being dramatic and needed to calm down. I am completely calm, I said. And you can either accept that Rachel needs serious help, or you can join her on the list of people who aren't allowed around my daughter. Elodie asked if I was really going to keep them from their granddaughter. That, I said, depends entirely on whether you can accept reality. I handed the phone back to Nate and walked away, my whole body shaking. 2 days later, Natalia called. Her husband, Gregory, a family therapist, wanted to meet with Nate and me. We met at his office. Gregory asked us each to explain our perspectives. I went first, trying to keep my voice steady. When I got to the part about Nate agreeing to let Rachel take Lily, Gregory stopped me. Is that accurate, Nate? Nate nodded. I thought it would help her rest. Gregory asked him why he thought his wife needed to be separated from her 3-week-old baby to rest. Nate had no good answer. Gregory spent the next hour helping Nate understand how deeply he'd betrayed my trust. He asked Nate if he would have suggested giving Lily to anyone else for weeks. Nate said no. Why was Rachel different? Nate said because she was family. Gregory explained that Nate's family had a pattern of protecting Rachel from consequences due to her infertility, which taught her that manipulation works. Nate looked uncomfortable but didn't deny it. Gregory said enabling harmful behavior wasn't love. It was avoiding the discomfort of accountability. He asked Nate what he was more afraid of, his wife leaving him or his family being upset with him. Nate took a long time to answer. Later that week, I met with Christina Watkins, a family law attorney Natalia recommended. Her office was all dark wood and leather. She reviewed all my documentation, listening to the recordings, reading the texts. You have a strong case for a restraining order against Rachel, she said. She also mentioned limited custody arrangements for Nate's family if they posed a risk. I asked what this would mean for my marriage. Honestly, Christina said, that depends on whether Nate is willing to prioritize his daughter's safety over his family's feelings. A lot of marriages don't survive this kind of betrayal, but some do if both people are willing to do the hard work. I thought about those first perfect days with Lily before Rachel poisoned everything. Could we ever get back to that? Christina suggested sending Rachel a formal cease and desist letter first. It would establish boundaries and create documentation if she violated them. I agreed. The letter went out that afternoon. No contact with me, Lily, or our home. No showing up where we'd be. No messages through others. 2 days later, Elodie called me directly. Her voice cracked. She'd been thinking nonstop, couldn't sleep. She understood I was protecting Lily, but watching her daughter, Rachel, fall apart was killing her, too. Elodie admitted she'd known for years Rachel's obsession wasn't healthy, especially after her late miscarriage. They'd suggested therapy back then, but Rachel insisted she was fine, and they'd let it drop. We should have pushed harder, she cried. Should have made Rachel get help. Then she asked if, someday after Rachel got proper treatment, we could work towards supervised visits. Not now, she quickly added, but someday. I just need to know there's hope. I sat on my couch, Lily napping on my chest, feeling the weight of Elodie's grief. I told her honestly that I didn't know if I'd ever feel comfortable with Rachel around my daughter. Every time I thought about those recordings, Rachel saying I didn't deserve Lily, my whole body went cold. But I said I'd be willing to see how Rachel's treatment went if she actually got help and respected boundaries. My first priority has to be protecting Lily, I told her. Your feelings about missing your granddaughter come second to my daughter's safety. I wasn't trying to be cruel, but I wouldn't risk Lily's well-being to make anyone else feel better. Elodie understood, thanking me. After we hung up, I cried into Lily's soft hair, hating that everything had gotten so broken. Gregory called Nate a few days later, suggesting individual therapy for him too. Nate needed to work through his family patterns separately from our marriage issues. Nate agreed immediately and started seeing a therapist twice a week. At first, I was skeptical, thinking he'd just go through the motions. But after his third session, he came home looking shaken. He told me his therapist helped him see how his family's dysfunction had normalized Rachel's boundary violations, how they'd prioritized keeping peace over addressing real problems. He'd spent his whole life being told Rachel needed extra understanding, internalizing it to the point where he couldn't recognize when her behavior crossed into dangerous territory. Understanding that didn't excuse him, he said, but it helped him see why he'd failed to protect us. Watching him actually do the work, instead of just promising to change, made something tight in my chest loosen slightly. I started therapy too, with a woman Natalia recommended who specialized in postpartum issues and family trauma. Her office felt safe, all soft lighting and comfortable chairs. She let me cry through our entire first session without trying to fix anything. She helped me understand that what I was experiencing wasn't postpartum depression, but a completely normal response to betrayal and threat. She said my protective instincts were healthy, not paranoid, and that I was right to trust my gut about Rachel's intentions. She also helped me process the grief of losing the family experience I'd imagined, the big gatherings, the close relationships that would never happen now. She validated my anger at Nate while also helping me see that people could genuinely change. Our sessions became a space where I could say all the ugly, scared, furious thoughts I couldn't say anywhere else. 3 weeks after I'd given Nate his ultimatum, I started noticing real changes. He didn't wait for me to ask him to handle things with his family anymore. When his dad called asking about Thanksgiving, Nate shut it down immediately. We're not ready for family gatherings yet. When Rachel tried to send a gift for Lily through their other sister, Nate intercepted it and sent it back with a note. All contact needs to stop. He attended every therapy session without complaint or excuses. He got up for night feedings without me asking, took over more household tasks so I could rest. The small things, but consistent. The hypervigilance I'd been carrying started to ease, just slightly, though I still checked the locks twice before bed and kept my phone close. Then Christina called. Rachel's therapist had reached out, requesting a mediated conversation where Rachel could apologize and take accountability. Rachel had been working hard in treatment and understood she'd caused serious harm. A mediated session, in a controlled setting with clear boundaries, might provide closure. I felt sick at the thought of seeing Rachel again, but Gregory said it might actually help. He explained that Rachel taking real accountability, not just empty apologies, could give me a sense of completion. The session would happen at Christina's office with attorneys and Rachel's therapist present, so I'd be completely protected. I agreed reluctantly, mostly because I wanted to look Rachel in the face and tell her exactly what she'd done. The mediated session happened on a cold Tuesday morning. Rachel walked in looking terrible, like she'd aged years. Her face was pale and thin, eyes red and swollen. She sat across from me at the big conference table, her therapist beside her. Nate sat beside me. Our attorneys flanked us. Rachel started crying before anyone said anything, her whole body shaking. Her therapist prompted her twice. When Rachel finally spoke, her voice was broken, small. She said she'd spent the last month in intensive therapy trying to understand what she'd done and why. She cried through most of her apology, stopping to wipe her face. Rachel admitted she'd convinced herself that I didn't deserve Lily after everything she'd been through trying to have a baby. Watching me get pregnant and have a healthy delivery when she'd lost her own had broken something in her mind. She'd started believing the universe had made a mistake, that Lily should have been hers. Her therapist helped her understand this was her grief and trauma talking, not reality. She knew now she'd tried to manipulate everyone, lied about me being unfit, tried to turn the family against me. There was no excuse, she said. She'd been so consumed by her own pain. She'd stopped seeing me as a real person with real feelings. I sat there, listening to her fall apart, feeling a complicated mix of anger and pity. When she finished, I took a breath. "I'm sorry for your pain, Rachel," I said, and I meant it. I knew what infertility felt like, what loss felt like. But you tried to steal my baby. That's not something I can just forgive because you're hurting. I understood she was sick and needed help, but understanding didn't erase what she'd put me through. I agreed to consider supervised contact in the distant future if she stayed in treatment and respected boundaries, but I made no promises. Lily is my daughter, not yours, I told her, and that will never change, no matter how much therapy you do. Rachel nodded, accepting it. Christina slid a document across the table. No contact with me or Lily for at least 6 months. Continued therapy with documentation. Future contact only through supervised channels with my explicit permission. Rachel signed it without arguing, her hand shaking. Then she looked at me one last time, whispering, "I'm sorry. I hope someday you can forgive me, even though I don't deserve it." I didn't respond. I just watched her leave, feeling exhausted, empty, and relieved all at once. Nate wrapped his arms around me outside Christina's office building. I shook against his chest, the tears coming hard and fast. All the anger and sadness I'd been holding back during the meeting finally broke through. I wasn't crying about Rachel anymore, not really. I was crying for Hugo and Elodie, who I'd actually liked, who I'd imagined as involved grandparents. I was crying for those first perfect days after Lily was born, when everything felt magical, before Rachel's obsession poisoned it all. I was crying because my daughter would grow up never knowing her aunt, would hear stories someday about why half the family couldn't come to her events. Nate just held me tighter, letting me sob, not trying to fix anything with words. The pediatrician's office was bright and cheerful. Lily was 8 weeks old now, chubby and healthy, smiling at anyone who looked at her. The doctor measured and weighed her, checked her reflexes. Everything was perfect. Lily was hitting all her milestones, gaining weight beautifully, showing no signs of stress or neglect. The doctor typed notes into her computer, commenting that I was doing an excellent job. I asked if she could note that in Lily's records, explaining briefly about the family situation. She looked at me with understanding. "I'll document that Lily shows clear signs of excellent care and bonding with her mother. Zero concerns about the home environment or parenting quality." I texted Christina a photo of the visit summary before we even left the parking lot. One more piece of evidence that I was exactly the mother Lily needed. Hugo called 2 days later. His voice was careful, almost formal. "Can we visit Lily?" I told him they could come to our house on Saturday afternoon for 2 hours. No surprise visits, no showing up early, and they had to leave immediately if we asked. Most importantly, no mentioning Rachel, no trying to convince us to give her another chance. Hugo agreed to everything without arguing. When Saturday came, I was so nervous I almost canceled. Elodie brought flowers and a new outfit for Lily, setting them on the coffee table without making a big deal. They sat stiffly on our couch at first, making awkward small talk. But then Lily made one of her little cooing sounds and reached toward Elodie, and something softened in both of them. They spent the next hour just being grandparents, making silly faces, asking about her sleep schedule. Nobody mentioned Rachel. Nobody tried to defend her. When their 2 hours were up, they thanked us and asked if they could visit again next week. After they left, Nate admitted, that was harder than I expected. Seeing my parents try so hard to respect boundaries they never had to think about before. The support group met Tuesday evenings in a church basement. 8 women, all dealing with family members who wouldn't respect boundaries around their kids. One woman's mother kept posting photos of her grandson on social media after being asked to stop. Another's sister showed up at her daughter's school, claiming to pick her up. A third dealt with in-laws giving her toddler foods he was allergic to. Listening to their stories made my situation feel less weird, less isolating. These weren't bad people or crazy people, just mothers protecting their children from family members who thought their wants mattered more than clearly stated boundaries. The group leader taught us phrases for holding firm without getting pulled into arguments. She reminded us that feeling guilty didn't mean we were doing anything wrong. People who violate boundaries often use guilt as a weapon. I left each meeting feeling stronger and less alone, with new strategies for the inevitable moments when Nate's family would push back. Natalia planned a gathering at her house. She invited 6 of my closest friends, the ones who'd been checking on me constantly. Her dining room table was covered with food, and she'd made a banner celebrating strong moms in glitter letters. It was cheesy and perfect. We spent 3 hours talking and laughing. Everyone took turns holding Lily, telling me how amazing I was for protecting her. Nobody brought up Rachel except to say I'd handled everything exactly right. Natalia made a toast about reclaiming the joy of new motherhood that had been stolen from me, and I cried happy tears for the first time in months. My friend Jessica brought a journal and had everyone write advice for me to read later. By the time I left, my face hurt from smiling, and I felt lighter than I had since Lily was born. The drama had consumed so much energy that I'd forgotten what it felt like to just celebrate my daughter and enjoy being her mom. The letter arrived 4 months after the mediation session, forwarded through Rachel's therapist. Rachel's handwriting covered 2 pages, asking if she could send gifts for Lily's milestones. She promised not to include notes or try to contact us directly, just wanted to acknowledge birthdays and holidays with presents. The letter was careful, respectful, acknowledging that gifts didn't equal a relationship and that she understood we might say no. I brought it to my next therapy session with Paloma. We talked through it. What boundaries would I need? How would I feel if she violated the agreement? Paloma reminded me I could always change my mind. After thinking about it for a week, I decided to allow it. Gifts could be sent through her therapist who would check them. No cards, no notes, no attempts to use the gifts as a way back into our lives. I told Christina, and she updated the agreement, making sure Rachel understood any violation would end the privilege immediately. The park was busy that Tuesday morning. I'd brought Lily to meet Natalia and her kids. We were sitting on a bench when my friend Maria walked over, a weird expression on her face. "I just saw Rachel," she whispered, sitting in a car across the street, watching us. My stomach dropped. I looked where Maria was pointing and saw Rachel's gray sedan parked along the curb. Rachel, visible in the driver's seat. She wasn't approaching or trying to talk, just watching. Maria said she'd been there at least 15 minutes. I grabbed Lily from her stroller. "We have to go." My hands were shaking so badly I could barely buckle Lily into her car seat. Rachel had somehow known we'd be at this specific park at this specific time. She was either following us or had access to our schedule. Either way, she'd completely violated the agreement we'd made just weeks ago. The gifts, the respectful letter, all of it had been meaningless. Rachel still thought she had some right to be near Lily. Still couldn't accept she'd lost all access. I called Christina from the parking lot, my voice high and panicked. She told me to go straight home and stay there while she filed for the restraining order we'd discussed months ago. This was exactly the kind of escalation she'd warned me about. Rachel testing boundaries, seeing what she could get away with. Christina said the documented pattern of behavior, plus this stalking incident, would make the restraining order easy to get. When Nate got home, I was still shaky. He called Rachel immediately, his voice cold and furious in a way I'd never heard before. He told her she'd just destroyed any possibility of ever meeting Lily, that showing up at the park was stalking, and he was done making excuses for her. Rachel tried to say she just wanted to see Lily from a distance, but Nate cut her off. She'd proven she couldn't be trusted with even the smallest privilege, and now she'd face legal consequences. He hung up while she was still trying to explain. Christina filed the paperwork the next morning. We had a court date within the week. The judge reviewed all the documentation, recordings, texts, the social worker incident, and now the park stalking. Rachel's lawyer tried to argue she was just a grieving woman who made mistakes, but the judge wasn't buying it. The pattern was too clear, the escalation too obvious. The restraining order was granted that same day. Rachel had to stay at least 500 feet away from me, from Lily, from our house, and from any location, she knew we went regularly. If she violated it even once, she'd face criminal charges. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt relief and sadness mixed together. This was it. Rachel would never hold Lily, never be at family gatherings, never have the aunt relationship she desperately wanted. But she'd done this to herself by refusing to accept boundaries, by choosing her obsession over getting real help. Hugo and Elodie came over that evening, looking destroyed. Elodie's eyes were red from crying, and Hugo looked like he'd aged 10 years. They sat on our couch, and Hugo said they couldn't believe it had come to this, that their daughter now had a restraining order against her. Nate didn't soften or apologize. He told them Rachel did this to herself by stalking us at the park after we'd given her a chance. She'd proven she couldn't follow even the most basic rules, and now she'd lost everything. Hugo started to say something about Rachel being sick and needing compassion, but Nate stopped him. "You've been making excuses for Rachel your whole life," Nate said, "protecting her from consequences because you felt guilty about her infertility. And that's exactly why she thought she could get away with trying to take our baby. If you'd gotten her real help years ago instead of enabling her, maybe none of this would have happened." Elodie cried harder, but Hugo went quiet. After a long moment, he admitted Nate was right. They should have insisted Rachel get therapy after her miscarriage. They should have seen the warning signs when she fixated on other people's children. They'd failed Rachel by protecting her from reality, and now everyone was paying the price. I told Nate's parents they'd been making excuses for Rachel their whole lives, and it finally caught up to everyone. Elodie wiped her eyes and said they knew I was right, that they'd see a therapist themselves to work through their guilt. Hugo asked if we could all move forward now that Rachel had legal consequences and was getting treatment. I said maybe, but it would take time, and they needed to respect that I'd never fully trust them after they believed Rachel's lies so easily. 5 months had passed since that day I gave Nate his 2 choices. We were in a better place now, functioning like a real team again. But something fundamental had shifted between us. I trusted him more than during the worst of it, when I'd wondered if he'd actually try to take Lily from me. He'd proven himself through hundreds of small actions, showing up for therapy every week, changing his work schedule to be home more, standing up to his family without me asking. But there was a scar there that we both felt. Some nights I'd wake up and watch him sleeping, remembering how he'd nodded along while Rachel listed my supposed symptoms of depression. The memory would hit me like ice water, and I'd have to remind myself that he'd chosen us, that he was different now. Nate knew about these moments. I told him in therapy that sometimes I still saw him sitting on that couch, with Rachel's printed articles spread between them. He'd cried and said he understood, that he'd spend the rest of his life proving he'd never betray me like that again. Gregory helped us figure out what our marriage looked like now. In one session, Nate said he felt like he was on probation, always waiting for me to decide he hadn't done enough. I admitted that was partly true, that I needed him to understand his betrayal had permanent consequences. Gregory said that was fair, that Nate had broken something precious and rebuilding would take years, not months. He helped Nate accept that I needed ongoing reassurance, that he couldn't just apologize and expect everything to go back to normal. Nate agreed without arguing. He said he'd rather spend his life earning back my trust than lose me and Lily by being defensive. That session helped more than all the others combined because Nate finally got it. He understood that his actions had changed our marriage forever, and he had to live with that. My mom packed up to go home, but promised to visit every few weeks. She hugged me at the door and said she was proud of how I'd protected Lily, that not every woman would have the strength to stand up to her husband and his entire family. I cried because I hadn't felt strong during any of it, just scared and angry. She said that's what real strength looked like, doing the hard thing even when you're terrified. Before she left, she pulled Nate aside. I heard her tell him he'd better never give her reason to come back and take me and Lily away for good. He promised her he wouldn't. Watching her car pull away made me sad because having her there had felt like a safety net. But I also knew Nate and I needed to figure out our family without her as a buffer. I started taking Lily to baby classes at the community center. Music class on Tuesdays, movement class on Thursdays. I met other moms who just wanted to talk about normal things. Nobody knew about Rachel or the restraining order or any of the drama. We talked about sleep schedules and teething, about whether our babies were rolling over yet. One mom complained about her mother-in-law buying too many toys, and I had to bite my tongue because at least her mother-in-law wasn't trying to steal her baby. But it felt good to have these normal conversations, to be around people who saw me as just another new mom instead of someone who'd been through trauma. I exchanged numbers with a few of them, and we started meeting at the park. Lily loved watching the other babies, and I loved having friends who didn't know my story. Nate came home one evening and told me he'd gotten a promotion at work. More money, better hours, and the option to take some time off. We sat at the kitchen table after Lily went to sleep, and he said he wanted to take the paternity leave he'd skipped when she was born. He'd only taken a week off initially, and then everything with Rachel had exploded, so he'd missed out on that early bonding time. He wanted 2 weeks now, just to be with Lily, to have the experience that got stolen from us by the crisis. I felt my throat get tight because this was exactly the kind of thing the old Nate wouldn't have thought of. He would have taken the promotion and kept working, not understanding what he'd missed. But this Nate, the one who'd been humbled and changed by almost losing everything, he got it. He understood what Rachel and his own weakness had taken from our family. I told him yes, that I thought it would be good for both of them. Rachel's therapist called Nate's phone and asked to speak to both of us. We put her on speaker. She said Rachel was moving to another state for intensive treatment at a facility specializing in infertility trauma and obsessive disorders. Rachel wanted us to know she was leaving, that we wouldn't have to worry about running into her. The therapist said Rachel had accepted she would never have a relationship with Lily and was trying to build a life that didn't revolve around babies she couldn't have. Part of me felt relief wash over me because Rachel being far away meant one less thing to worry about. Part of me felt sad that it had come to this, that Rachel's pain had twisted into something so dangerous she had to leave her entire life behind. But mostly, I felt glad she'd be hundreds of miles away instead of one town over. Nate asked how I felt. I said I hoped the treatment helped her, but I was mostly just grateful Lily would be safer. Nate's parents called a few days later, asking if they could have regular grandparent time now that Rachel was moving away. They understood they'd messed up, but they wanted to be part of Lily's life. Nate looked at me. I thought about it for a long minute. They'd hurt me by taking Rachel's side so easily by calling to check on my parenting. But they'd also apologized, admitted they were wrong, and started therapy themselves. I told them they could visit every Sunday afternoon at our house. They had to respect our rules, leave when we asked, and never bring up Rachel or make excuses for her. Hugo agreed immediately. Elodie promised they would follow whatever boundaries we set. Their first visit was awkward. They were too careful, asking permission before holding Lily, leaving after exactly an hour, even though we hadn't asked them to go. But by the third visit, they relaxed and just enjoyed their granddaughter. They brought age-appropriate toys, not the overwhelming piles Rachel used to. They asked about Lily's development without implying I was doing anything wrong. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. I bought a journal and started writing down everything that had happened. Partly for my own processing, working through the feelings that still hit me at random moments. Partly so I'd have a record if Lily ever asked why she didn't know her Aunt Rachel. I wrote about the early days, about Nate's betrayal, about the recordings and the social worker incident. I wrote about the restraining order, the therapy, the slow process of rebuilding trust. Paloma said documenting my feelings would help prevent them from turning into long-term anger. She said I needed to process the trauma instead of just pushing it down. Some entries made me cry. Others made me angry all over again. But getting it all out on paper felt like releasing pressure from a valve that had been building for months. 6 months after everything started, Lily was thriving. She was sitting up on her own, grabbing at everything, laughing at silly faces. The pediatrician said she was hitting all her milestones right on schedule. I was sleeping better now that she was down to one night feeding. The constant fear that had lived in my chest for months was finally easing, though I was still careful about who came around my daughter. I didn't leave her alone with anyone except my mom and Natalia. I checked the locks every night. I kept my phone charged and nearby, but I wasn't jumping at every sound anymore. I could take Lily to the park without scanning for Rachel's car. The hypervigilance was fading into normal parental caution instead of trauma response. Nate suggested we go on a date night, our first since Lily was born. My mom came to babysit. I felt nervous leaving Lily, even though I knew she was safe with my own mother. We went to a quiet restaurant. It felt strange to be out without the diaper bag, without listening for Lily's cries. Nate reached across the table and took my hand. He said he wanted to talk about the future, about maybe trying for another baby, eventually about building the family we'd always wanted. I told him I wasn't ready yet, that I needed more time to feel secure in our marriage and trust that he'd protect our family no matter what. He said he understood and would wait as long as I needed. Then he promised me he would never let anyone, family or not, threaten our little family again. He said he'd learned what mattered most and he wouldn't forget it. I believed him because he'd spent 6 months showing me, not just telling me. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror one morning while Lily napped and barely recognized the person staring back. Not because I looked tired or different physically, but because something in my eyes had changed. I'd become someone who could record conversations with family members, who could threaten divorce, who could get a restraining order against her husband's sister without flinching. 3 years ago, I would have backed down, apologized, tried to keep everyone happy even if it hurt me. Now, I protected my daughter first and dealt with hurt feelings later. The change scared me sometimes because I never wanted to be the person who caused family rifts or made people choose sides. But I'd learned something important during those awful weeks after Lily was born. I could trust my instincts even when everyone around me said I was wrong. I could stand up to people I loved when my daughter's safety was at stake, even when my hands shook and my voice cracked. That strength didn't come naturally or easily. It came from pure fear mixed with love so fierce it surprised me. Every time I wanted to give in or apologize or make peace, I remembered Rachel saying she'd be a better mother and Nate nodding along like an idiot. That memory kept my spine straight when guilt tried to bend it. Life settled into a new normal that wasn't perfect, but it was ours. My relationship with Nate's family would never be what it could have been if they'd supported me from the start. There would always be careful boundaries, topics we avoided, and a weariness on my part that wasn't there before. But Lily was safe and loved and thriving. She didn't know her Aunt Rachel, and probably never would. She'd grow up with a small but solid circle of people who genuinely cared about her without hidden agendas. I learned that being a good mother sometimes means making hard choices that hurt, choices that other people judge or don't understand. It means trusting your instincts even when everyone says you're wrong. It means protecting your child even when it costs you relationships and dreams and the family experience you imagined. I'd make the same choices again without hesitation because Lily's safety mattered more than anything else. That knowledge sat solid in my chest, unshakable. I became someone fiercer and stronger through this experience. Someone who could stand up to people I loved when my daughter needed protecting. That person looked back at me from the mirror now, and I was proud of her, even though the journey to become her hurt like hell. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever faced something like this, where you had to make impossible choices to protect your family? Tell me what you think. I really want to know.